Welcome back to our channel. Find hidden gems in your pocket, subscribe for rare coin reveals. The year is 1983, a year marked by pivotal shifts and changes in the United States, both politically and economically. The country, under President Ronald Reagan, is experiencing a period of recovery after the early 1980s recession. The economy is stabilizing, unemployment is dropping, and the country is slowly emerging from the financial turmoil that had affected families and businesses just a few years earlier. The world is moving forward in the wake of the Cold War, and technology, particularly the rise of personal computers, is reshaping the way people live and work. But amidst all these global shifts, there is something much smaller, something that most people carry in their pockets without a second thought: the 1983 one-dime coin. When we think of a coin, we tend to think of its value in terms of everyday purchasing power, something that is frequently spent on small items like a candy bar or a soda. However, as time goes on, coins like the 1983 dime take on much more significance. From a numismatic perspective, these coins can hold deep historical meaning, and some rare examples can even be worth tens of thousands of dollars. The 1983 one dime is no exception. Let's take a closer look at its historical context, design, and why it has captured the attention of collectors and enthusiasts alike. In 1983, the U.S. was navigating its way through the final years of the Cold War. The ideological struggle between the United States and the Soviet Union was still a central issue, though it was becoming clearer that the Soviet system was beginning to unravel. The U.S. economy was on the mend, though challenges like inflation and the national debt remained significant concerns. The early 1980s recession, which had affected millions, was officially over, and America was experiencing growth, particularly in the technology sector. Politically, President Ronald Reagan was in his second term, having won re-election in 1984. His administration focused on tax cuts, deregulation, and a strong military stance against the Soviet Union. Globally, the U.S. was a dominant force, and within the country, many were adjusting to the changes brought about by a shift in both domestic and international politics. But while the world seemed to be on the brink of monumental change, life for the average American citizen was still rooted in the day-to-day. People went to work, raised families, and continued to rely on the same forms of currency they had always known. For Americans in 1983, the one-dime coin, with its simple value of 10 cents, was part of their everyday experience, something they barely thought twice about when it came time to pay for goods. What many didn't realize, however, was that the 1983 one dime was about to become a sought-after item in the world of coin collecting, and a few rare versions of it would fetch prices well beyond its 10-cent face value. The design of the 1983 one dime coin remained true to the traditional appearance of the U.S. dime, which had been in circulation since 1946. The dime features the portrait of Franklin D. Roosevelt, the 32nd President of the United States. Roosevelt, who served 4 terms in office and led the country through the Great Depression and World War II, was chosen for the dime to honor his legacy. He passed away in 1945, and the U.S. Mint, in 1946, unveiled the design of the dime to commemorate his service and leadership during the war and the Depression. Roosevelt's image has remained a consistent feature on the dime for decades, standing as a tribute to his leadership and his vision for a post-Depression, post-war world. The obverse of the 1983 dime features Roosevelt's likeness, with the inscriptions, "Liberty" and "In God We Trust," along with the year of minting, 1983. On the reverse side of the coin, the design has remained relatively unchanged since 1946. The reverse of the 1983 dime depicts a torch, an olive branch, and an oak branch. The torch symbolizes freedom, the olive branch peace, and the oak branch strength. Together, these symbols represent the unity and resilience of the United States. In 1983, however, there was an ongoing conversation about the cost of producing coins, particularly the dime. The U.S. Mint, dealing with the rising prices of copper and nickel, was under pressure to make coins more cost-effective to produce. While the dime continued to be minted with its familiar design, this was the last year in which the dime, along with other coins, was produced in the traditional composition of 91.67% copper and 8.33% nickel. Just a few years later, the U.S. Mint would switch to a more cost-effective composition for the dime. But the 1983 version would stand as a reminder of a time when the U.S. Mint used a heavier metal content. this subtle shift in materials would make the 1983 dime a key piece in understanding the evolution of U.S. coinage, and some of the 1983 dimes produced with minor minting errors would go on to become highly sought after by collectors. The 1983 one-dime coin was minted at the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints. In fact, the Philadelphia mint produced the majority of the coins, but there were distinct differences in the coins produced at each mint. The Denver mint's dimes were marked with a D mint mark, while the Philadelphia mint produced dimes that did not have a mint mark. In contrast, proof dimes, which are specially minted for collectors and intended to have a high level of detail and polish, were produced at the San Francisco mint. These proof dimes were specially designed to be sold in coin sets and were not intended for general circulation. As with all coins, the production process was complex. The metal blanks, or planchets, were carefully prepared and then struck under great pressure to create the final image. For the 1983 dime, the production process was generally smooth, but some small errors occurred during minting. These errors, while often overlooked at the time, would later prove to be valuable in the world of coin collecting. To the average person, the 1983 one-dime coin may not stand out as particularly valuable. However, to coin collectors, or numismatists, the 1983 dime holds significant appeal. Coins from specific years or mints can be worth far more than their face value, depending on their rarity, condition, and any minting errors they may feature. One of the key reasons collectors are drawn to the 1983 dime is because of a rare minting error that occurred during the production process. Some 1983 dimes were mistakenly struck with a higher concentration of copper in the alloy, creating a noticeable difference in the weight, color, and composition compared to regular dimes. These bronze dimes have become one of the most sought-after variations of the 1983 dime, and when one appears for sale at auction, it can fetch a price far higher than its 10-cent face value. Other errors that increase the value of certain 1983 dimes include off-center strikes, double dies, and die cracks. These imperfections, although subtle, are what collectors treasure the most, as they make the coin unique. The scarcity of such error coins is what drives demand and increases their potential value. In 2023, the 1983 one dime, while still worth 10 cents in its typical circulated state, has become an increasingly valuable item for collectors. Uncirculated versions, in pristine condition, can easily sell for a few dollars, but it's the error coins that attract the highest bids at auction. For instance, the rare copper alloy 1983 dimes, the ones with the incorrect copper composition, can sell for as much as $135,000. Yes, a dime that was once worth just 10 cents can now fetch such an impressive sum at the right auction, especially if it's an example of a rare minting error. This value doesn't come from the coin's face value, but rather from its historical significance, rarity, and the unique story behind its creation. When collectors seek out error coins, they are not only looking for an item of historical importance but also a piece of numismatic history, a symbol of the mistakes that occur in the mass production of currency and the fascination with what makes these errors so rare. As we reach the end of this journey, it's incredible to think that something as small and unassuming as the 1983 one-dime coin has become a significant piece of numismatic history, valued by collectors at an astonishing $135,000. In 1991, the United States was in the midst of an era of transformation. With a shifting political landscape and global events shaking up the world stage, it might seem hard to imagine that something as small and seemingly insignificant as a coin would stand out. But in the world of numismatics, that's exactly what happened. Enter the 1991 one-dime coin, a small yet fascinating piece of American history, one that would go on to intrigue collectors, hold historical significance, and eventually become a sought-after item in the world of coin collecting. At first glance, the 1991 one-dime may seem like just another everyday coin. After all, it had been in circulation for decades. But as we dive deeper into its context, design, production, and why this particular dime is so valuable today, we'll uncover a story that's much richer than its 10-cent face value. So let's go back to 1991 and explore how this little coin became much more than just pocket change. The world of 1991 was marked by several defining moments. The United States, under President George H.W. Bush, was navigating the tail end of the Cold War and gearing up for the Gulf War, which would later dominate global headlines. In the midst of this, the economy was in a state of flux. The country had just emerged from a mild recession in 1990, and there were still signs of economic instability. But despite these challenges, 1991 would set the stage for a resurgence in global technology, particularly with the widespread adoption of personal computers, which were becoming increasingly popular in households and offices across the nation. Coin collectors, though, weren't thinking about personal computers or geopolitics when they turned their attention to a 1991 one dime. For them, the focus was on the numismatic world, a world where the smallest detail could make a huge difference. And for those in the know, the 1991 dime was about to become something far more significant than just a coin for everyday use. The design of the 1991 one dime coin remains consistent with the dime's appearance since 1946, when Franklin D. Roosevelt's portrait was first introduced to the coin. Roosevelt, the 32nd President of the United States, served during some of the nation's most critical years, including the Great Depression and World War II. After his death in 1945, the U.S. Mint honored his legacy by placing his likeness on the dime. This tribute is fitting, as Roosevelt's policies helped shape modern America, and his image has been a symbol of resilience and leadership for decades. The obverse front of the 1991 dime features a left-facing profile of Roosevelt, with the inscription "Liberty" above his head and "In God We Trust" to the left. The year of mintage, 1991, is placed to the right, completing the basic design of the coin. The reverse back of the coin features the symbols of a torch, olive branch, and oak branch, representing freedom, peace, and strength, respectively. Despite its simple design, the 1991 one dime has a historical context that makes it unique. This particular year's coin marks a specific moment in U.S. history, one that's tied to economic challenges, political leadership, and the everyday lives of Americans who use this coin without realizing its future significance. But what makes the 1991 one dime even more interesting to collectors is its minting details. The U.S. Mint produced the 1991 dime at the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints. As with other years, the mint marks were added to the dimes to identify their place of production. Dimes struck in Philadelphia were left without a mint mark, those struck in Denver bore the D mint mark, and those produced at the San Francisco Mint were minted as proof coins and featured the S mint mark. While the production process for the 1991 dime was relatively routine, it wasn't without its occasional flaws. Minting errors, as subtle as they may seem, are often the most prized possessions among collectors. And over time, the 1991 dime would reveal a few such anomalies that made it far more valuable than its face value. One such error is the off-center strike, a flaw where the coin is not aligned properly on the die, resulting in a portion of the design being cut off. These types of errors happen when the die and the planchet are not perfectly aligned during the minting process, and they result in unique, one-of-a-kind coins. Collectors often pay a premium for these error coins, as they are considered to be rarer than those struck correctly. Additionally, there are instances where the dime was produced with a misalignment of the die, leading to double strike errors or variations in the coin's details. These small mistakes are what make the 1991 dime particularly appealing to collectors who are eager to add a rare coin to their collection. When an error is discovered, the excitement among collectors can be palpable. And for some, this is the key to why they're willing to pay large sums for certain coins. As the years have passed, the 1991 one dime coin has found its place in the numismatic community. What makes this coin so appealing to collectors is its combination of historical context, classic design, and the occasional production errors that have made specific coins from this year highly sought after. But it's not just the error coins that attract attention. Even in uncirculated or near mint condition, the 1991 dime has become a valuable item in the world of coin collecting. For those who are lucky enough to own a rare 1991 dime with significant minting errors, or those that have been preserved in pristine condition, the coin can fetch a substantial price. While most 1991 dimes can still be found for a small price, collectors know that it's the rare variations that can command attention at auction. Over time, the demand for these special coins has steadily increased, making them more valuable. As the years go by, fewer and fewer uncirculated examples remain, and even fewer are in perfect condition. Coin enthusiasts and collectors will often seek out the rarest and most unique examples to add to their collections. And these unique coins have a particular value on the market. Now, for the big reveal, the impressive value of the 1991 one-dime coin. While it's true that most of the 1991 dimes in circulation are still worth just 10 cents, the rare and valuable versions can command astonishing prices. Depending on their condition, minting errors, and rarity, certain 1991 dimes have been sold for as much as $124,000 at auction. Yes, you heard that right, $124,000. This price might seem unbelievable for a coin that was once a simple part of everyday life, but it's a testament to the world of coin collecting, where rarity and history converge to create items of incredible value. Whether it's a dime with a unique error or one that has been impeccably preserved over the decades, the 1991 dime has proven to be a sought-after piece of American history. And so, as we wrap up the story of the 1991 one-dime coin, it's incredible to think that something as small as this coin, which millions of Americans used without a second thought, has evolved into a valuable collector's item, fetching prices that far exceed its original worth. It's a reminder of how even the most ordinary things can hold extraordinary value when viewed through the lens of history and rarity. That concludes our deep dive into the 1991 one-dime coin. From its historical context to its design, minting details, and collector appeal, this little coin is so much more than just a piece of currency. It's a symbol of a particular time in American history, and for lucky collectors, it's a rare treasure worth thousands. If you ever happen to stumble upon a 1991 dime with a unique error or in pristine condition, you might just hold in your hands a piece of numismatic history worth $124,000.